It all started with a small group of university students who were looking for something different, something that could make their research project stand out. They were curious people by nature, always looking for unusual stories that no one dared to touch. One evening, while sitting in the library, one of them came across an old newspaper article with the headline, "The Man Who Survived Everything." At first, everyone laughed. It sounded like one of those exaggerated local legends, but as they read further, the story became impossible to ignore. It talked about a man who had survived explosions, shipwrecks, and deadly accidents over the years. The article called him the human battleship. The name alone was enough to spark their imagination. Who was this man? How could someone survive so many near-death experiences? Was he just extremely lucky? Or was there something special about him that science couldn't explain? Their curiosity grew stronger with each passing minute. The man's name was Rafik. He used to work at a dockyard many years ago, helping build and repair large ships. According to the article, Rafik had once been trapped under collapsed steel beams, nearly drowned during a storm at sea, and even walked away from a ship explosion with nothing more than a few burns. He was said to have disappeared from public life after retiring, living somewhere near the old harbor where the sea always smelled of iron and salt. Adil, the most determined among the group, looked at his friends and said, "If this story is true, we need to meet him. Maybe his body has some natural resistance or healing ability. Imagine what we could learn from that." The others hesitated. One of them warned, "People like this don't usually want attention. He's probably been through a lot." But Adil's excitement was contagious. "We'll just talk to him," he said. "We'll be respectful. It could be the most important case we ever study." That night, they started gathering whatever they could find, old photos, articles, local records. But there wasn't much. It seemed like someone had slowly erased Rafik's presence from everywhere. Still, they managed to contact a retired journalist who had once interviewed him. When they met the old journalist in a quiet tea house, he looked uncomfortable as soon as they mentioned Rafik's name. "That man, he's not someone you want to bother," he said quietly. "I spoke to him once years ago. There's a reason he lives alone. Some stories should stay buried." Adil leaned forward. "We don't want to hurt him or dig into his private life. We just want to understand what makes him so special. We'll be careful." The journalist sighed, looking out the window as if remembering something unpleasant. "Careful won't be enough," he said. "He's not dangerous, but the things connected to him are." Still, after a long pause, he scribbled an address on a torn piece of paper. "If you're going to do this, at least go respectfully. Don't push him." The next morning, the team set out for the coastal town mentioned in the note. It was a quiet place. Fishing boats lined the shore, and the air was filled with the cry of seagulls. The streets were narrow, with old brick houses that looked like they had been standing there for generations. They walked until they reached the edge of the harbor, where an old house stood alone facing the sea. It looked abandoned at first, rusted gate, cracked windows, and a roof that had seen too many storms. But when they knocked, they heard footsteps from inside. The door creaked open, and there he was, Rafik. He was taller than they expected, his shoulders broad but slightly bent with age. His face carried deep lines, and his eyes were calm but distant, like someone who had seen too much. A thin scar ran from his temple down to his jaw. "What do you want?" His voice was deep, steady. Adil quickly introduced himself in the group, explaining that they were students researching human endurance and resilience. He said they were fascinated by Rafik's story and wanted to learn more, purely for scientific purposes. Rafik stared at them for a long moment before stepping aside. 5 minutes, he said simply. Inside, the house was dim but surprisingly clean. Old photographs hung on the walls, mostly ships, workers, and the sea. There was a smell of salt and metal in the air, mixed with the faint aroma of strong tea. They sat in silence for a while until Rafik finally spoke. "You people come here thinking there's something special about me," he said. "But I'm just a man who's seen too much pain." Adil spoke gently. "We don't mean to disturb you, sir. We just want to understand how you survived so many things that others couldn't." Rafik gave a tired smile. "You think surviving is a blessing? It's not. Every time you survive, you lose something. A friend, a piece of yourself, a bit of peace." The room fell quiet again. The students looked at each other, unsure how to continue. Then one of them asked softly, "How did it all begin?" Rafik sighed and leaned back. "It began with the sea," he said. I started working at the dockyard when I was barely 20. The ships we built were meant to last forever, but nothing lasts. Not metal, not men. He talked about his early years, how he had seen accidents that should have killed him but didn't. A steel beam once fell right beside him, crushing another worker while Rafiq walked away with just scratches. Another time, during a storm, a ship he was repairing broke free and nearly pulled him into the sea. He was found hours later unconscious but alive. At first, people called him lucky. Then, as the years went by and the accidents continued, people began to whisper that he was blessed or cursed. Some even said the sea itself protected him. Listening to him, the students felt a strange mix of admiration and unease. There was no pride in Rafiq's voice, only heaviness, as if survival had become a burden. When the 5 minutes stretched into an hour, Adil finally asked, "Would it be okay if we came again? We'd love to learn more about your experiences." Rafiq looked out the window toward the endless ocean. The sun was setting, turning the waves orange and red. "You can come," he said quietly, "but don't expect answers you'll like." As they left, the wind picked up, carrying the scent of salt and rain. None of them spoke during the walk back. Something about Rafiq's words lingered in their minds. He wasn't like anyone they had ever met. He seemed more like a man who had lived several lives in one body. That night, Adil wrote in his journal, "There's something different about him. He doesn't fear death because he's met it too many times. But there's also something he's hiding, something he didn't tell us. We have to find out what it is." They didn't know then that their curiosity was leading them down a path they would one day regret. At that moment, all they could think about was the mystery, the man who had survived everything, the human battleship. The next visit was already planned. None of them realized that with every question they asked, they were slowly unlocking a story that wasn't meant to be told. The waves outside crashed harder that night, as if the sea itself was warning them, but they didn't listen. Their search for truth had just begun. The next morning, Adil and his friends gathered at their usual cafe near the university. The small group sat around a wooden table covered with open notebooks, coffee cups, and excitement. They had met Rafiq only once, but that meeting had left a strong impression on everyone. He wasn't just another man with an interesting past. There was something about him that felt deeper, heavier, and strangely haunting. Adil couldn't stop thinking about the way Rafiq looked at the sea while talking, as if he was watching something the rest of them couldn't see. "He said we could come again," Adil reminded the group. "We can't let this go. His story could be a rare study in human endurance. We need to document it properly." One of his friends, Saad, looked uncertain. "I don't know, man. He seemed uncomfortable. Maybe we should leave him alone." But curiosity is a powerful thing. Once it gets inside your mind, it doesn't leave easily. "We'll go carefully," Adil said. "No pressure, no cameras at first. Just questions. He'll open up if he feels safe." They all agreed, though a bit nervously. By afternoon, they were back on the coastal road, heading toward Rafiq's old house. The sea was rough that day, the waves crashing against the rocks louder than before. It almost felt like the ocean was warning them not to return. When they reached the house, the door was open. Rafiq was sitting outside on an old chair, sharpening a small piece of wood with a knife. He didn't seem surprised to see them. "You came back," he said without looking up. Adil smiled politely. "You said we could," Rafiq gave a small nod. "Curiosity is a strong thing," he said. "Sometimes too strong." They sat quietly for a few minutes before Adil asked, "We wanted to know more about your time at the dockyard, if that's okay." "You mentioned accidents. How did you manage to survive so many?" Rafiq set the knife down and looked at them with tired eyes. "You think I know the answer? I don't. Sometimes I think death just forgot about me." There was no anger in his voice, just sadness. He told them about a day years ago when a heavy metal chain snapped during a shiploading operation. The chain hit him with such force that everyone thought he was dead. But he woke up hours later with only bruises. Another time, a fire broke out on the shipyard. While others ran, he was trapped inside for nearly 10 minutes, yet came out coughing but alive. As he spoke, the students listened closely, taking notes. Every detail fascinated them. The human body wasn't supposed to handle that kind of trauma. But it wasn't only his physical strength that stood out. It was his mental endurance. He didn't seem proud of surviving. If anything, he seemed weighed down by it. After a while, Adil asked softly, "Didn't anyone ever try to study you before? Maybe doctors?" Rafiq hesitated before answering. Yes, he said quietly. Once long ago, but it didn't end well. That sentence hung in the air like a heavy cloud. Before anyone could ask more, Rafiq stood up. Come inside. I'll show you something. They followed him through a narrow hallway filled with old photographs and metal parts from ships. In one of the rooms, he opened a wooden chest and pulled out a faded file. Inside were pictures of ships, accident reports, and handwritten notes. This, he said, placing them on the table, is all I kept from my time working on the Nisar. The students leaned closer. The ship's name was familiar. It had sunk decades ago under mysterious circumstances. The reports described an explosion during a routine engine test. Rafiq was listed among the casualties, yet there he stood alive. You were supposed to be dead? Saad asked in disbelief. Rafiq looked away. I was on that ship when it exploded. The others didn't make it. His voice broke slightly. I woke up days later on the shore. No one could explain how. The students were silent. Adil's heart raced. He wanted to ask 100 questions. How far from the shore was he found? How deep was the ship when it sank? But he could tell Rafiq wasn't ready. After a long pause, Rafiq said, That's when I stopped asking questions. Some things are better left unknown. Outside, the wind howled and a window creaked. The air in the room felt heavy. They decided not to push him further that day. As they stood to leave, Rafiq said something that made them all freeze. If you come again, he said, don't come at night. The sea doesn't rest then. The group exchanged nervous glances. No one knew what he meant, but none of them dared to ask. They thanked him and walked back to their car. During the drive, the atmosphere was tense. Saad finally broke the silence. What do you think he meant by that? The sea doesn't rest? Adil shrugged. Maybe it's just an old sailor's saying. You know how people who live near the ocean have strange beliefs. But deep down, even Adil couldn't shake the feeling that Rafiq's words carried a hidden meaning. That night, back in their rented guest house, they watched the interview recordings. Although they had promised not to film, Adil had secretly kept a small recorder on his bag. He told himself it was just for note-taking purposes. As they replayed Rafiq's words, they noticed something strange. In the background of the recording, during the moment he mentioned the Nisar explosion, there was a faint humming sound, low and rhythmic, like machinery. None of them remembered hearing it in person. Maybe it's background noise, one of them said. But when they played the same clip again, the humming grew slightly louder each time, like a distant engine running underwater. They all fell silent. Finally, Adil turned off the recorder. Let's not overthink this, he said quickly. We'll go back tomorrow and ask him about the ship. Maybe there's a logical explanation. No one argued, but no one slept well that night either. The next day, they went back to the house again. This time, Rafiq wasn't outside. The gate was locked. They knocked, called his name, but there was no answer. After waiting for an hour, they decided to leave a note under the door, asking him to contact them whenever he felt comfortable. Just as they were about to leave, a neighbor called out from across the lane. An old woman leaning on a cane said, You're looking for Rafiq? Yes, Adil replied politely. Do you know where he went? She shook her head slowly. That man doesn't go anywhere. He doesn't even come to the market. Some nights I see his lights flicker, but mostly his house stays dark. You shouldn't be going there again. People say strange things happen in that house. What kind of strange things? Saad asked. The woman looked at the sea, her eyes narrowing. You'll hear it too if you stay long enough. The sound of a ship that never reached the shore. The group stood quietly for a moment. Then Adil thanked her and they walked back to the car. None of them spoke on the drive home. That evening, Adil received a short message on his phone from an unknown number. It was just one line. Stop looking for me. He showed it to the others and everyone immediately knew who it was from. Rafiq. For the first time, the group began to feel uneasy. Their excitement was now mixed with fear and guilt. Had they gone too far? Was their curiosity turning into something dangerous? Still, Adil couldn't stop thinking about it. There were too many unanswered questions. Who had tried to study Rafiq before? What happened during that ship explosion? And why did he warn them not to come at night? As he sat by the window that night listening to the distant sound of waves, Adil made a quiet promise to himself. He wouldn't give up. He needed the truth, no matter how dark or hidden it was. He didn't know it yet, but their next visit would change everything. The story of the human battleship was only beginning to reveal its secrets, and soon they would realize that some mysteries are better left untouched. Adil spent the next few days restless. No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't stop thinking about Rafiq, the man who had survived everything yet wanted to be forgotten. The short message, "They stopped looking for me," kept replaying in his mind. It didn't sound angry, just tired. Still, it made him feel uneasy, as if they had crossed an invisible line. But curiosity is a strange thing. Once it finds a crack in your mind, it grows, and Adil wasn't ready to let go yet. He told himself it wasn't about fame or research anymore. It was about understanding a man who had faced death so many times and still lived. Something deep inside him felt that Rafiq's story carried a truth that needed to be told. One evening, the team gathered at Adil's apartment. The air was tense. No one wanted to admit it out loud, but they all felt something strange about their last visit to Rafiq's house. Saad spoke first. "I think we should stop. The man doesn't want to be disturbed. He literally told you to stop looking for him." Adil nodded but didn't agree. "We've come this far," he said. "We can't back off now. Don't you want to know what really happened on that ship?" There was silence for a moment before another friend, Bilal, leaned forward. "We could go back one last time. Not to bother him, just to observe. Maybe we'll find something that explains all this." That idea caught everyone's attention. Observe sounded less intrusive, more scientific. They decided they'd go quietly, just to see if anything unusual happened around Rafiq's house. A few days later, they reached the coastal town again. The evening sky was painted with streaks of orange and purple, and the wind carried a salty chill. The neighborhood was unusually quiet, as if everyone had gone inside early. Rafiq's house stood at the end of the lane, still and silent like before. They didn't knock this time. Instead, they sat across the street, pretending to check equipment in their car. They had brought a small camera, a sound recorder, and a temperature sensor. Basic tools they often used for research. Hours passed. Nothing happened. Rafiq's house remained dark except for a faint light flickering through a back window. They were about to leave when Bilal whispered, "Look, someone's moving inside." Through the thin curtains, they saw Rafiq pacing around the room, talking to himself, or maybe to someone else. His gestures were sharp, his face tense. Then suddenly the lights dimmed and everything went quiet. Adil looked at the sensor on his phone. The temperature had dropped by almost 6 degrees in less than a minute. "That's not normal," he said. "There's no reason for the air to get colder this fast." Before anyone could respond, the sound recorder picked up a faint metallic hum, slow and rhythmic, like a distant engine running. The same sound they had heard earlier in the recording. Saad swallowed hard. "Do you hear that?" "Yes," Adil said quietly. "It's the same noise from before." The hum continued for about 30 seconds, then stopped suddenly. The light inside the house flickered once more and went completely dark. For a few moments, no one spoke. Then Bilal said, "We should go. This doesn't feel right." They left quickly, but Adil's thoughts were spinning. What was that sound? Was it a generator or something else? He needed to find out. The next morning, they went to the dockyard where Rafiq had once worked. The place was mostly empty now. Rusted cranes, broken containers, and the endless sound of waves crashing against metal. They met a few older workers who remembered Rafiq. One man with gray hair and oil-stained hands told them, "Rafiq? That man's a mystery. I worked with him for years. He survived things no one could. Once a whole section of the dock collapsed. We pulled him out from under steel beams. He was bruised but walked away like nothing happened. The rest of us still can't explain it." Adil asked carefully, "Do you remember anything about the ship called Nisar?" The man's expression changed immediately. "That ship was cursed," he said in a low voice. "They said it was built with some new kind of engine technology. The government wanted to test it in secret. When it exploded, most of the workers died. Rafiq was the only one who came back. But after that, he wasn't the same." "What do you mean?" He became quiet, kept to himself. Some nights, when he passed by the docks, people swore they could hear that same engine sound again, even though the ship was gone, like it was following him. The workers laughed nervously after telling the story as if they didn't believe their own words. But Adil wasn't laughing. Everything seemed to be pointing to one thing, that whatever happened on that ship had changed Rafiq in ways science couldn't explain. Later that evening, They went back to their guest house to review the data from the night before. The sound recording had captured more than just the metallic hum. In the middle of the noise, there was a faint pulse, steady like a heartbeat, but mechanical, not human. "This doesn't make sense," Bilal said, adjusting the volume. "It's almost like something inside the house was vibrating." Adil stared at the screen. "Or someone," he said quietly. The next morning, they decided to confront Rafiq again, not to invade his privacy, but to give him a chance to explain. When they reached his house, he was outside, sitting by the water with his fishing rod, staring at the waves. He didn't look surprised to see them. "You people don't give up easily," he said without turning around. Adil spoke softly. "We saw something strange last night. We're not here to bother you, but we need to understand." Rafiq sighed, still looking at the horizon. "You want to understand? Then listen carefully. The sea gives and the sea takes. When I survived that explosion, I didn't come back the same. Something changed. I can feel it inside me even now." He turned toward them, his face calm but his eyes tired. "You think I'm lucky? No, I'm a reminder of what happens when humans go too far trying to control nature." The students were speechless. Rafiq continued, his voice almost trembling. "That engine they built on the Nisar, it wasn't ready. It was meant to be powerful, to make ships faster than ever. But the energy it produced, it was unstable. The day it exploded, I was near the core. Everyone else burned or vanished. I should have too. But instead I woke up on the shore days later, and since then I've never been the same. My body feels alive but not normal. I can sense things I shouldn't. I hear the sea when it's calm. I feel metal when it's near." The group stood frozen. None of them could think of what to say. After a long silence, Rafiq said quietly, "You wanted to study me. Go ahead, but be ready. The truth won't make you proud, it will scare you." He stood up, picked up his fishing rod, and walked back toward his house. That night, Adil couldn't sleep. He sat by the window looking out at the dark sea. The air felt heavy, filled with something unspoken. He kept hearing Rafiq's words echoing in his mind. "The truth will scare you." Just as he was about to close his notebook, the sound recorder, left on the table, suddenly switched on by itself. The same metallic hum started playing louder than ever. Startled, Adil unplugged it, but the sound didn't stop. It seemed to be coming from outside, from the direction of the sea. He stepped out onto the balcony. Far in the distance, under the moonlight, he saw faint flashes on the water's surface, like metal reflecting light, moving slowly beneath the waves. Then, just as suddenly as it appeared, everything went silent again. Adil went back inside, heart pounding. He didn't tell anyone what he saw. He only wrote one line in his notebook before going to bed. Whatever happened to Rafiq didn't end with that ship. It's still out there, waiting. He didn't know it yet, but what he witnessed that night was only the beginning. The deeper they went into Rafiq's story, the more they would realize that some mysteries aren't meant to be solved, because the truth doesn't always set you free. Sometimes it traps you forever. The night after Adil heard that strange metallic hum echoing from the sea, he barely slept. His mind kept running in circles, trying to make sense of everything. Every sound outside, every creak of the floor, every whisper of wind made him feel uneasy. He tried convincing himself it was all just his imagination, but deep down he knew it wasn't. Something was truly different about Rafiq and whatever happened on that ship all those years ago. The next morning, the team gathered in the small kitchen of their guest house. They looked tired and anxious. No one had slept well. Bilal poured coffee for everyone and said quietly, "I kept hearing that humming noise again last night. I thought it was just in my head, but I swear I heard it." Saad nodded immediately. "I did too. It came in short bursts like waves." "You think it's coming from the ocean?" Adil rubbed his forehead. "Whatever it is, it's not just the sea. It's connected to him somehow. I saw something last night, light reflecting on the water like something metallic moving under it." The room went silent. Everyone stared at him. "You're serious?" Bilal asked. "Yes," Adil said firmly. "We need to find out what it was, and this time we'll get proof." They spent the day preparing for another visit to Rafiq's house. This time they wanted to be ready. They brought small hidden cameras, sound recorders, and a few scientific sensors that could measure changes in air pressure, vibration, and temperature. Adil promised they wouldn't push Rafiq too hard. "We'll just observe," he said. "If anything strange happens again, we'll have it recorded." When the sun began to set, they reached the old house by the harbor. The waves were higher than usual, crashing against the shore with a restless rhythm. The air smelled of salt and rust. Rafiq's door was closed, but the light inside was on. Adil knocked gently. After a moment, Rafiq opened the door. He looked calm, but his eyes seemed heavier than before, as if he hadn't slept in days. "You again," he said softly, not angry, just tired. "We're sorry," Adil said quickly. "We didn't mean to bother you again, but we can't stop thinking about your story. We want to understand what really happened to you." Rafiq looked at them for a long time. Then he sighed and stepped aside. "Come in," he said. Inside, the air was cool and still. The room looked almost the same as before, except now there were papers spread out on the table. Old ship logs, maps, and what looked like blueprints. Adil noticed the name Nisar written across several of them in fading ink. "You still keep all this?" Adil asked. Rafiq nodded. "These are the only pieces of my past I couldn't throw away." He sat down and poured himself a cup of tea. "You think you can handle the truth?" They all looked at each other. "Yes," Adil said. Rafiq stared at the cup in his hands for a long time before speaking. "When that ship exploded, I thought I was dead. Everything went white. The sound was like thunder under the water. But then I woke up on the shore. My body was covered in burns, yet I felt no pain. The doctor said it was impossible. My heart rate was strange, my temperature was lower than normal. They kept me under observation for weeks, but eventually they stopped asking questions. People don't like mysteries they can't explain." He paused and looked at Adil. "After that, I started noticing things. Machines around me acted strange. Radios, lights, even engines, they reacted when I got emotional. I didn't understand it at first, but soon I realized something from that explosion didn't leave me. It became part of me." The student sat frozen. The words didn't sound like fantasy. Rafiq's tone was too real, too filled with exhaustion to be fake. Adil leaned forward. "Are you saying that whatever powered that ship is still inside you?" Rafiq gave a slow nod. "Maybe, I don't know how. I don't know why. But it's there. I can feel it sometimes, like a heartbeat that isn't mine." Bilal whispered. "That's why the temperature changes around you, isn't it? Why machines act up." Rafiq looked down. "Yes, that's why I stay alone. When I get upset or afraid, things around me start to react. Metal vibrates, electricity flickers. It's like the energy wants to escape." For a long time, no one spoke. The only sound was the faint rustle of the sea breeze through the window. Finally, Adil asked, "Can we record this? For research purposes only. We won't publish anything without your permission." Rafiq hesitated, but then agreed. "Fine," he said quietly. "But promise me one thing, you'll stop after tonight. Don't dig deeper than this." Adil nodded, though deep inside he knew he wouldn't stop. They set up their small recording devices around the room, pretending to just take notes. But secretly, Adil had also hidden a small motion sensor behind a vase, hoping to capture any physical reaction when Rafiq spoke. The conversation began again, this time with more detail. Rafiq described the day of the explosion, how the engineers had been testing an experimental power system meant to revolutionize ship engines. It wasn't a normal fuel. It was something new, something powerful and untested. When the core overheated, everything around him turned blinding white. The next thing he remembered was waking up on the shore with the wreckage scattered miles away. As he talked, Adil noticed something strange happening. The temperature sensor on his phone started to drop rapidly again, just like the last time. The air felt heavier and the faint hum returned. Bilal whispered, "It's happening again." Rafiq's hands began to tremble slightly. His breathing grew uneven. "You should stop recording," he said, his voice shaking. Adil tried to calm him. "It's okay, just take your time. You're safe." But it was too late. The lights flickered once, twice, and then a deep vibrating sound filled the room. The metal lamp on the table started to rattle. The motion sensor blinked rapidly. Rafiq clutched his chest, his face pale but calm. "This is what I meant," he said in a strained voice. "It happens when I remember too much." Suddenly, the sound recorder picked up a loud pulse, like a heartbeat mixed with a low engine noise. Everyone froze. The room's air pressure changed slightly. It felt like the air itself was vibrating. Adil jumped to switch off the devices, but as he did, the sound stopped as suddenly as it had started. The light steadied and Rafiq slumped back in his chair, breathing heavily. No one said a word for several seconds. Finally, Saad whispered, "Are you okay?" Rafiq nodded weakly. "You see now why I live alone," he said. It's safer this way, for everyone. Adil's heart was still pounding. He wanted to ask 100 more questions, but he knew pushing further might hurt Rafik. "We're sorry," he said softly. "We didn't mean for this to happen." Rafik gave a faint smile. "Curiosity isn't a crime," he said. "But it has a price." The group packed their things quietly and stepped outside. The sky was completely dark now, and the moon reflected off the waves like a silver blade. The air was colder than before, but no one dared mention it. As they reached their car, Adil turned back one last time. Through the small window, he saw Rafik sitting silently, staring at the sea again. His face was calm, but his hands were still trembling slightly. On the drive back, no one spoke. The hum of the car's engine filled the silence. Every time they passed the shore, Adil thought he heard faint echoes of that same metallic vibration beneath the sound of the waves. When they finally reached their guest house, Bilal said quietly, "Whatever that was, it wasn't human. And yet he's just a man." Adil didn't answer. He looked out the window at the dark ocean and whispered to himself, "He's more than a man. He's living proof that some secrets shouldn't exist." That night, as they reviewed the recordings, the audio captured something they hadn't noticed before. A faint voice mixed within the hum, almost like a whisper saying, "It's still here." No one could tell whose voice it was. Adil closed the laptop slowly. For the first time, he felt real fear, not for Rafik, but for themselves. Because whatever was inside that man, whatever had survived with him, it wasn't finished yet. The sea outside roared louder, as if reminding them that they were in over their heads. They thought they were studying a man, but now they realized they had stepped into something far bigger, something that had been sleeping quietly for years, waiting for someone curious enough to wake it. The next morning, Adil woke up before the sun rose. The air inside the small guesthouse room felt heavy, as if the sea had crept inside during the night. He sat on the edge of his bed, trying to shake off the strange dreams that had filled his sleep. Dreams of glowing metal, crashing waves, and Rafik's voice echoing through endless corridors of a sinking ship. He walked to the window and opened it. The sky was still dark, but the horizon glowed faintly orange. The sound of the sea reached him from afar, calm yet full of secrets. Adil couldn't get Rafik's face out of his head. There was something tragic about that man, someone carrying a burden too heavy for any normal human to bear. Bilal came out of his room, rubbing his eyes. "You didn't sleep, did you?" he asked. Adil shook his head. "No. I kept thinking about what happened last night. That sound, the pressure, the lights. It all felt too real. I've seen natural phenomena before, but this was different." Bilal sighed and sat down. "I checked the recordings again before I slept. There's something else in the audio. When that pulse sound appeared, the background frequency matched the kind used in marine engines. But how could that happen in a normal house?" Adil looked thoughtful. Unless something inside him is reacting like a machine. Maybe that energy source he talked about didn't just burn him, it changed him. Saad joined them a few minutes later, holding a notebook. "We should go back to the harbor today," he said. "If the energy is connected to the sea, maybe there's still something in the water, something that connects to him." Bilal frowned. "We already promised him we'd stop." Adil nodded slowly. "We did. But if this is real, if it's not just a story, then it's bigger than all of us." He said that explosion was from an experimental ship, right? That means there were official records. Maybe if we find the wreckage, we'll finally understand what happened. They agreed to visit the local records office first. By mid-morning, they were standing in front of a small white building near the coast. Inside, the air smelled like old paper and sea salt. The clerk, an older man with tired eyes, looked surprised when they mentioned the name Nisar. "That ship," he said slowly, flipping through a dusty file. "That was a government research project. They said it was lost in an accident years ago. No survivors, or so they claimed." Adil exchanged a glance with Bilal. "No survivors? But one man lived." The clerk looked up sharply. "One man?" "Yes," Adil said. "We met him. He said his name was Rafik." The clerk's expression changed. He hesitated for a moment, then lowered his voice. "I remember that name. There were rumors after the explosion. People said he washed up on the shore a week later, burned but alive. The government took him for treatment, then nothing, no more reports, no follow-up. It was like they erased him." Adil felt a chill run through him. "Do you have any records of what the ship was built for?" The clerk shook his head. Most of the documents were classified. But I can tell you this. People around here still talk about strange things happening after that accident. Sometimes the sea glows at night like the water itself is alive. And fishermen say their radios pick up strange signals when they go near the wreckage site. The group thanked the clerk and left, their minds racing. They decided to rent a small boat and visit the spot where the ship had gone down. The sea that day was calm, though the sky had turned pale gray. As they sailed farther from the shore, the air began to feel different. Colder, heavier, almost charged with static. Adil turned on his recorder. "This is the approximate location based on old coordinates," he said quietly. "No signs of wreckage visible on the surface." Saad checked the sonar device they had brought. "Wait, there's something down there. About 30 meters deep. The shape looks metallic." Bilal leaned over the edge. Could it be the remains of the ship? Before anyone could answer, the water around the boat started to ripple. It wasn't like normal waves, it was circular, as if something deep below was pulsing rhythmically. The boat rocked slightly. The engine began to sputter. Then, just like at Rafik's house, that same low humming sound returned. Adil's heart pounded. "It's the same frequency," he shouted. "The same as last night." The hum grew louder, and for a split second the water glowed faintly blue. The group froze in awe. Then, just as quickly, the glow vanished and the engine restarted on its own. They looked at each other, terrified but amazed. "Did we just trigger something?" Bilal whispered. Adil didn't answer. His eyes were locked on the sonar screen. The object below them had moved. Slowly, very slowly. It was shifting position beneath the waves. He turned off the device immediately. "We're leaving," he said firmly. "Whatever that is, it's not safe." The ride back to the harbor was silent. The only sound was the distant cry of seagulls and the dull thump of waves hitting the boat. That evening, back at the guest house, they reviewed the data. The sensors had picked up a consistent frequency, exactly matching the hum they had heard near Rafik. The pattern looked like a heartbeat. "It's like something down there is alive," Saad said quietly. Adil looked at the graph again. "Or it's responding to him. Remember, he said he feels it when it reacts. What if the energy that fused with him during the explosion also stayed in the shipwreck? What if they're still connected?" They sat in silence for a long time. Then Bilal said, "If that's true, then he's not just carrying a piece of that ship, he's part of it." That night, Adil decided to visit Rafik one last time, alone. The others begged him not to, but he couldn't ignore the pull he felt. Something about this mystery wouldn't let him rest. When he reached the old house, the door was open. Rafik sat inside, staring at the sea through the window. He didn't look surprised to see Adil. "You went to the site, didn't you?" he said quietly. Adil nodded. "We had to know the truth." Rafik sighed deeply. "You shouldn't have. That place isn't just a wreck. It's still alive in its own way. And when you went there, it felt you." "What do you mean?" Adil asked, his voice trembling. Rafik turned to face him. His eyes looked distant, glowing faintly under the dim light. "When the explosion happened, the ship's core wasn't destroyed, it merged with me. That energy can't die. It's part of both of us now. It sleeps most of the time, but when someone disturbs the wreck, it wakes." "That's what you did." Adil felt his heart race. "So what happens now?" Rafik stood slowly. "It will try to connect. It's already begun. That hum you heard in the water, it's reaching out. Can we stop it?" Rafik shook his head sadly. "You can't stop something that was never meant to exist. All you can do is stay away." The wind outside grew stronger, whistling through the open door. For a brief moment, Adil thought he saw a faint blue light flicker beneath Rafik's skin, like veins glowing from within. Rafik looked at him with a faint smile. "Tell your friends to leave this town. The sea remembers everything." Before Adil could speak, a deep rumble echoed in the distance, the unmistakable sound of thunder rolling over the ocean, though the sky above was clear. He turned to look, and when he faced back, Rafik was gone. The room was empty, the teacup still warm on the table. Adil ran outside, scanning the shore, but there was no sign of him. Only the waves crashing harder than before and a soft metallic hum beneath the wind. As he stood there, staring into the endless water, a chilling realization hit him. Rafik hadn't disappeared. He had gone back to where it all began. And deep below the surface, something was waking up again. Something that once made a man into a living part of a machine, and now wanted him back. Adil could only whisper to himself, We wanted to study a human battleship, and now we've brought it back to life." The wind howled through the night as if the sea itself had heard his words and was answering back. For the next 2 days, Adil and his team could not focus on anything else. The sea outside the guest house looked calm, but something about it felt wrong, like it was hiding a heartbeat deep underneath. The weather had changed too. Clouds gathered more often, and a strange chill filled the air even when the sun was shining. Bilal kept pacing around the room, checking the data on his laptop again and again. "Every night the signal gets stronger," he said, pointing at the screen. "It's like whatever's under the water is moving closer to the shore." Saad looked nervous. "You think it's that wreck?" Adil didn't answer right away. He had been quiet since that night he met Rafiq for the last time. He still couldn't believe how the man had vanished without a trace. It was as if he had melted into the air, leaving behind only silence and that faint humming sound. Finally, Adil said softly, "It's not just the wreck." Rafiq said it himself, the ship's energy was alive, and now it's awake again. Bilal frowned. "But how?" He said it needed him to survive. "If he's gone, shouldn't it stop?" Adil looked toward the sea through the dusty window. Maybe he didn't disappear. Maybe he went back to complete whatever connection still existed between him and the ship. The words hung in the air like smoke. None of them wanted to believe it, but deep down they knew it could be true. That night, as they were preparing to rest, the lights suddenly flickered. The same low hum began to echo through the walls of the guest house. At first it was faint, like the distant rumble of a storm, but within seconds it grew louder, more powerful, until the glass of the windows began to vibrate. Saad shouted, "Turn off everything! Electronics, lights, phones!" They did, but the sound didn't stop. Instead, it seemed to seep into the floor, into the very air they were breathing. Adil grabbed a flashlight and ran outside. The night sky was dark and wild. The sea, which was usually calm at this hour, was glowing faintly blue, just like the last time they saw it near the wreck site. Bilal and Saad followed him to the edge of the shore. "Look," Bilal pointed toward the horizon. Something massive was moving under the water, its outline faint but visible beneath the glowing surface. It wasn't a wave, it was too slow, too steady. Adil whispered, "It's the ship." As they watched, a large metal structure began to emerge slowly from the sea. The sound that filled the air was deafening, like thousands of gears grinding at once. Water poured off the rising shape, revealing broken steel plates and twisted machinery covered in seaweed. But what froze them completely was the sight near the top, a faint, human-like figure standing amid the wreckage. Bilal gasped. "That can't be." But Adil already knew who it was. Even from a distance, he could feel it. The same strange pressure in his chest, the same electric pull in the air. It was Rafiq. The man stood still, his body glowing with a soft metallic light. The air around him shimmered like heat waves. He didn't move or speak, but they all felt the same thought in their minds, like a whisper without words. Adil took a step forward, drawn by something he couldn't explain. "Rafiq," he shouted. "Can you hear me?" There was no response. The wind roared louder and the waves crashed violently against the shore. The ship seemed to pulse with energy, and every time it did, the lights in the nearby town flickered. Bilal grabbed Adil's arm. "We need to leave. Whatever this is, it's dangerous." But Adil shook his head. "He's still human. We can't just run. We brought this back to life. We have to fix it." He broke free and stepped closer to the water. The glow around Rafiq brightened as if reacting to him. For a brief moment, Adil saw Rafiq's face clearly. It looked calm, peaceful even, but his eyes were not the same. They shimmered like liquid metal, emotionless yet aware. "Why did you come back?" Adil shouted again. This time Rafiq's voice echoed faintly, not through the air but inside their minds. "It's awake now. It remembers everything." The ground beneath their feet trembled. The waves rose higher, splashing over the rocks. Behind them, the town's warning sirens began to wail as the lights went out one by one. Saad yelled over the noise, "We have to go." But Adil didn't move. He stood frozen, watching as the massive wreck continued to rise. And then, as suddenly as it had begun, everything stopped. The hum vanished. The sea went still and the glowing light around the ship faded. When the silence returned, the structure began to sink back into the ocean, slowly disappearing beneath the waves once again. Rafiq's figure too dissolved with it, until only the dark water remained. Bilal rushed to Adil's side. Are you okay? Adil nodded weakly, still staring at the sea. He stopped it, he said. He didn't want it to destroy everything. He went back to control it. They stayed there for hours, waiting, but nothing happened again. The sky cleared and the morning light returned as if nothing unusual had occurred. The sea looked calm and harmless, but they all knew it wasn't the same anymore. Over the next few days, the local authorities arrived. They questioned Adil and his team, asking about the strange power fluctuations and the lights in the sea. Adil told them it was likely an underwater current disturbance, something natural. He didn't mention Rafiq or the wreck. No one would have believed him anyway, but he couldn't forget what he saw. Every time he closed his eyes, he could still picture Rafiq standing tall on that metal surface, half human, half machine, guarding something deep below. Weeks later, when the team finally packed up to leave the coastal town, Adil took one last walk to the shore. The sky was bright and quiet, and fishermen were preparing their boats as usual. Everything looked normal, but as he stood there, he heard it again. So faint he almost thought it was his imagination. That same metallic hum. He smiled sadly. "You're still down there, aren't you?" he whispered. "Protecting it. Protecting us." A gentle wave brushed against his shoes as if answering him. He turned and walked away without looking back. On the long drive home, Bilal asked, "Do you think he's really gone?" Adil looked out the window at the endless blue horizon. "No," he said softly. "He's part of the sea now. Maybe that's where he was always meant to be." Months later, their research video went viral, not because of any supernatural claim, but because of the mystery surrounding it. People were fascinated by the story of the lost ship Nisar and the man who supposedly survived its explosion. Some said it was all myth. Others believed something powerful still slept under the ocean. Adil never confirmed or denied anything. He just watched silently whenever people discussed it online. He knew the truth, and he also knew some truths were too heavy to share. One evening, as he sat on his balcony overlooking the city lights, his phone buzzed. It was a message from an unknown number. No words, just an audio file. He hesitated before playing it. When he did, his heart froze. It was the same low hum. And faintly, under that hum, came a voice he recognized. "Tell them to stay away from the deep." Adil stared at the screen, his hands trembling. Then slowly he closed his eyes and deleted the file. He knew what it meant. The connection wasn't broken, it was alive. From that day on, he never went near the sea again. But sometimes, late at night, when the world was quiet and the wind blew through the streets, he could still hear that distant sound, a faint metallic heartbeat calling from somewhere far below. And in that moment, he always thought of Rafiq, the man who became the human battleship, and how he had given up everything to keep the world safe from what the ocean still remembered. They had wanted to study him, to understand what made him different, but now they wished they hadn't, because some mysteries once awakened never go back to sleep.